Hello there, and thank you for coming. This is another Wominspiration event, and my reports from the first Wominspiration event, which were on the 8th of March, i.e. last week, are excellent. So people enjoyed it very much. But let me tell you a little bit more about that. First of all, my name is Dalim. I think most of you know me. And also, I think most of you are to do with BCS. Who is a BCS member here? The answer is most people, apart from a little cluster of people at the back. We'll work on you later, and a row of people here. So all BCS members get to work on these people. Who is an ISACA London chapter member? Well represented at the front and partly at the back. So welcome, welcome. Who is a member of BCS Women? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have tripled almost the number of BCS women representatives here in comparison with March the 8th. So excellent and welcome. And who can claim to represent She Leads Tech? Sue again by proxy, and Ellis pretends he is as well. So that's great. So 2. So that is a doubling of numbers in comparison with the 8th. So welcome 2. The main thing is this is an event for you. But when I say for you, I'm also addressing our fine lineup of speakers at Speakers' Corners here, who will be on their soapboxes later. I'm also including you as audience members, and I'm including me. I'm chairman of BCS North London branch, and my fine list of North London branch committee members, who are mostly not here because they're outside trying to usher in the last people who are keen to get here. But all of that is fine. I do apologize for starting late. We're starting 10 minutes late. As you see, as you'd expect maybe, at the Chartered Institute for IT, we've got technical issues. So we're just overcoming that. And remember, IT is about having a place at the trailing edge of technology. What you do in a professional body, if you come to running one, is you let other mad fools rush in, make the mistakes, and then you come in wisely and say, you see, this is what you should have done. So we're well placed for that, but I do not welcome comments of that nature this evening. I've been thinking of enough of them myself. Okay, so what are we going to do this evening, and what's the format? Now, you should all have a series of sheets with you. There's one group of people I want to capture as well. Who is a student here? 1, 2, 3 from London Met. Lady there, possibly? No, she was straightening her hair. Anybody else? Nobody. Okay, so we're missing out on our target audience, the people who we really wish to inspire. And that's very much in line with last time. So thank you for the inspired people from London Met. Hopefully there are 1 or 2 others. Are there any other students here? No, there definitely aren't. So we're missing out on the publicity we sent out to 8 universities in this region, inviting students to come. So you can help with that. You can spread the word of what we're doing. Please do, and let's get more people to come here. Why? Because this is supposed to be an inspirational event. What we're trying to do is present a whole selection of fine people who have got a story to tell. And we've got some great people here who are going to do just that. And they will tell you their stories, providing the presentations work. Haven't checked yet. And then we'll have a panel session. In between the two, providing there's time, we will have a few minutes of break where stretch your legs or whatever. So what we're going to have is presenters Sharon and Susanna, first of all, and then we'll switch to the others being Lynn, Vladlena, Rebecca, and Jill, in that order. Can you see their profiles on your pieces of paper? Has anyone not got that? Good. Yeah, that's all right. Read your partner's one. Great. Thank you very much. So please join me have a look at her profile in welcoming Sharon Moore.
Hi everyone. Don't worry if you haven't read about me, because hopefully I'll be talking about me for the next 10 minutes or so. I am going to set my alarm now so that I don't go on for too long. I'm assuming there's not a doodah, so I will just start. So that's me. If you've got any questions that you don't get answered this evening, feel free to email me or find me on Twitter. Please no abuse. I've got a really good clout score and I wouldn't want that to get, no, I'm just kidding. Feel free to get in touch with me, you know, if a question pops into your head tomorrow that you want to ask. We were asked to talk about now, things I'm doing now, what I've done in the past, and then sort of some hints and tips and things I would recommend. So I will go very quickly through it all. I sent Dylan 20 slides and I'm sure he was having a heart attack when he saw that, but it's mostly because they're pictures and therefore you know, nice and brief. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, that's pretty much what you will see. I think I've changed my title slightly recently, but that's not because I've changed my job. I was just changing what I do in terms of a strapline. So I work for IBM and I'm our lead technologist in sales for travel and transportation. So I was just sharing that the kind of things I read on the plane are Rail Staff magazine, Rail Engineer magazine, Intelligent Transport magazine, totally embedded in the industry, but coming at it from a technology perspective. So I spend most of my time thinking about where the industry is, where it needs to go, and then looking at what the sort of technologies that IBM has, or maybe our business partners have, and sort of marrying the two together. And then the other way around, thinking about the cool things that we do and the industry's not even thought about yet, and saying, okay, how should you travel and transportation be thinking about embracing blockchain for loyalty or asset management or asset provenance or that kind of thing. So I get to the fun thing of talking to people about the things they could be doing and the objectives that are the outcomes that they could achieve, but still we're thinking at it from a technology perspective, so drawing good architecture pictures and that kind of thing. And I'll talk a tiny bit about the architecture side of things at all. Part of the reason I work in our travel and transportation sort of sector within IBM is stuff like that. That should have all come up on 4 different slides, but never mind. Basically, have you seen that kind of picture before? Yeah. There are lots of problems. So the other 4 that didn't go one at a time for some reason will have shown you things like I walked up to check into one of the Flybe desks and both of the kiosks said out of order, so actually there was no way to check in when I got to the airport, and other challenges with that. You know, some of this really simple stuff, it's actually very hard for travel and transportation companies to get right. So for me, there are so many problems, and I just love solving problems. I was interviewed for a podcast and they asked me what I did in my spare time, and I was like, well, I read books. Like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, well, I read crime books. And I was like, I think that's because they solve problems. So I seem to solve problems in my personal time as well as in my work time. So that's why I do it. But I haven't always been in travel, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So then, my sister doesn't know I put this picture up. She'd kill me if I did. And I know we're getting recorded, so I just need to make sure that she never sees it. Round about when I was that age, whatever that age is around about 12. So I'm the one, because you possibly can't tell, with the green skirt and the blouse next to the bride. My sister's the one in the red dress, and she hated that dress, she hated that hairband, and she hated her haircut. So she had no hope whatsoever, really. But right when I was that age, I wanted to be an architect. You know, the folks that design those amazing buildings like the Shard and that kind of thing. You know, not just about houses, just some of these amazing grand buildings. That's what I wanted to do. And I spent 2 weeks, I think it was, doing work experience when I was in my 3rd year at school. At an architect's office, and it was great fun. They gave me some real things to do, would never turn into real buildings, but it felt like it was real stuff. So I designed a kitchen, I was on site watching what some of the labourers were doing. It was great fun. But one of the things I really enjoyed doing was using their computer-aided design software, and I suddenly realised that computers weren't just about mail merges and the stuff that I'd been learning at school, that if you're as old as me is really boring and not, the program curriculum wasn't brilliant then. I think BCS have helped change that since then. But I realised that actually computers could be really good if you can use them in a practical way. And so at that point I started to think a little bit differently about my career and did more on the computing side of things, went to university, did software engineering, and I worked for IBM straight out of then. It's been a long time. I've had lots of different jobs in IBM, but I went straight to IBM from university. And the first thing I ended up doing was this. Okay, that's not a spreadsheet from my job, because if you look at the detail, anyway. I ended up doing some project management stuff when I first started working for IBM, and if I'm honest, it just wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun. In fact, I was a bit like this. I was really bored. It just wasn't where I'd expected my skills to get used. I'd loved programming. I loved thinking about how technology can fix things. And I was doing things like resource management and resource forecasting and risk and issue management. I actually got some really practical skills, which have been incredibly useful in my career, but it just kind of wasn't for me. And one of the groups I was supporting in that project office role was architects, except technology architects, not building architects. Can I just do a quick show of hands? Are there people in the room who are familiar with the term architect in a technology perspective? Because not every, you really are awesome, right, fab. That makes my job so much easier. Because often people look at me like, what? So yeah, it's my job to draw pictures of how things are going to work together, how technology is going to fulfill a number of functions, is going to deliver the requirements that my customers need to be filled. And then work with other people to make sure that whatever I've designed is developed. And if it's not developed that way, why not? And it might be because I got something wrong, it might be because somebody's got a better idea, it might be because somebody didn't follow what they were supposed to, and it might be because customers changed their requirements. And I just love that kind of, that big picture thinking, the occasional need to dive right into the detail, the talking to people all the time is so important. So for some students I've met who, I met one student who told me that she wanted to go and work in marketing because she just had this image that when she worked in technology, she was going to be in a room on her own and not speak to anyone ever. And she felt that marketing sounded like a place where you might get to know people, and therefore, she wanted to be in marketing. So, just talking to her about some of the real jobs in technology and what it really is like made a difference. But yeah, for me, architecture is just such a great, fun thing. Keeping an eye on the time. So this hasn't worked either. Technology. So this was to show you that in my life I've had, and the jobs that I'm doing, I've had some glamorous places to go to. So I've worked in finance, I've worked in the public sector as part of my working for IBM, big projects. And these were glamorous places like Swansea and Preston, and that is Swansea, the gentleman in the pink t-shirt. And the idea was behind these things was a bit of humour around about travel is not as glamorous as you might think it is. However, actually travel can be really glamorous. So this was then the positive side of the same places. The one where you can just see my head in the middle. That was, so Swansea, yes, they had triage on one of their main streets on a regular occurrence, just because it was better that than having everyone go to the hospital. So they like their drink quite a lot, and I thought Scots were bad. But that's looking at Three Cliffs Bray, absolutely beautiful views if you went out and about and explored the countryside. That picture on the right-hand side, when I'm in here in London, I get to go to the theatre and so I was just going to make a point about, the many experiences that you get when you get to work in a company like IBM where you travel for what you're doing. So challenges and opportunities, resiliency. It's a bit of a buzzword. But I think what it's really been one of the things that's helped me with my career, that being able to get on with it and just pick things up and learn things as I go, not feeling like I need to know everything, but also recovering from setbacks, whatever those might be. There have been some in my personal life, and there was one year with IBM where we changed the strategy a couple of times, and I ended up with something like 4 jobs in 1 year, and that's challenging. And it's worked out brilliantly for me, and you just have to look on it from a positive perspective. So a bit of resiliency, a bit of bounce back ability, I think will really make a difference. And actually, the way technology is going, this is going to be so important. So don't take failure to heart, especially when it's not been a decision that you've made, but somebody else has made for you. Where it hurts, do you know what? Have a good cry about it, have a pint of beer, have a glass of wine, or whatever it is you need to do, but then move on. So feel the pain if you really need to feel the pain, but then move on and use it in a positive way. I think that's been really important in my career. Getting a vision for what you want to do. Now your vision may change, I'm going to caveat that. You might, life circumstances, technology changes, there might be reasons that your vision will change. But get a vision, because life is too short to faff around, and I say that a lot. You know, don't spend your time doing what other people think you should do. Spend your time doing what you really want to do, where you feel you're getting value for yourself as well as giving value to others. So get that vision and keep an eye on it. It might change, and you might want it to change, and that's not a bad thing. But at least you have a direction that you're going in and have a purpose for what you're doing. So tips very quickly: don't do stuff that's just work. I sing in a choir, it's hugely rewarding, great fun. We rehearse most Sundays, we've got 3 concerts a year. It's a brilliant thing to do. I go to the theatre. I definitely recommend the network. So of the moment in terms of the story that it's telling, but I'm not getting commission from National Theatre, so that's unfortunate. And also I get out and about and I do some other things. So BCS Women, Deputy Chair for our organisation, lead what we're doing in Scotland. I've got a great team there. I'm involved in Scotland Women in Technology. I'm also on the board of an innovation centre called Census that's focused on IoT, sensing and imaging systems, and it's brilliant just to get another perspective through doing that. And my very last tip, and hopefully I've not overrun too much, I think I'm on my 11 minutes, and I mean, how often do we see this? But this is actually really important, and actually this is what's really key about diversity. Be yourself, everyone else is taken. Don't try and be other people. Use them as your role models, absolutely, but make sure that whatever you're doing is you're bringing their behaviours into yourself, and you're being sort of authentic, because that's really important, and being authentic, I think, will get you further than if you try to be somebody that you're not. So hopefully that's been interesting, and we'll have a good chat in the panel later on. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Sharon. And incidentally, Sharon represents BCS Women, as she's mentioned, and BCS Women are one of our sponsors for this event this evening. The others being ISACA London chapter, and she leads tech. And Sharon normally is based way up north in Scotland, so we're very privileged to have her this evening. So thank you very much, Sharon. Well, in our readjusted flow of things, our next presenter is Susanna. So please have a look at Susanna's incredible profile. Susanna is very much an innovator, an entrepreneur, somebody who's making things happen in the very dynamic fintech sector, just like Sharon is in terms of IBM, travel and transport. So I'm going to ask Susanna to travel all the way to over here. Please join me in welcoming Susanna.
Hello, so good evening, everybody. My name is Susanne Chisti. I'm the CEO of Fintech Circle and founder of Fintech Circle and the founder of the Fintech Circle Institute. And what we are doing is 3 things. On one side, we invest in fintech startups. You know, and this was when I studied 20 years ago in Berkeley, in the Silicon Valley, and it was at a time when the internet was being invented. You know, some of you might remember Netscape had its IPO in '95, and I worked for a fintech company in the Silicon Valley then, and I thought to myself how wonderful it would have been to be part of Yahoo, you know, to have been an investor in all these tech giants which launched then. And then I went back to Austria to finish my MBA, and then I came to London to work in banking, you know, for more than 15 years. And I left banking in 2014 to set up Fintech Circle. And the reason was because I wanted to invest in fintech companies myself. You know, I thought better to be invested in them than just to read about them in the newspaper when they become big blockbuster success stories. So this was my journey, you know, to set up Fintech Circle. And so what we do is, you know, we invest in fintech companies, we advise banks, as well in terms of fintech innovation strategies, and we also publish books. So we published, the first book was it's called The Fintech Book, so it's a kind of a book focused on the financial technology sector, and it was based on my own need initially to buy a book on fintech, you know, because when I left banking in 2014, I went to Amazon to buy a book on finance and technology, and there was nothing available at all. And at that time already, you know, the industry was very large. And I quickly understood why, because of course finance is very complicated. You know, you've got retail banks, you've got commercial banks, you've got investment banks, asset managers, you've got private banks, you've got cybersecurity issues, and then you've got, that's perfect.
I remembered something. You only gave this to me in a PDF, so you tell me and I'll press the button.
Yes, no worries, that's perfect.
Tell me when to go to the next.
Yes, and you know, and so finance is quite complicated. And then of course you've got different business models. You know, many companies are B2C, others are B2B, others are B2B2C. You know, you've got platform-based business models, and then you apply, and so you already have got a two-sided matrix. You know, like a matrix with x and a y axis. And then you have to apply the different technologies. You know, from AI to blockchain, to, you know, using cryptocurrencies in payments. And so you've got a three-dimensional cube basically. And that's why, you know, when we launched our FinTech book, which you see on this page here, we went out to our global community, which at that time was about 10,000 people, and asked for the best content, you know, the best thought leaders globally to contribute to our books. And we're launching 2 more books this year. One is on wealth tech and one is on insurtech, which focuses on those innovation areas in those 2 sectors. And we also launched the FinTech Circle Institute last September, which is about learning, about online learning and also in-person learning and education. If you go to the next page, you know, this is a quote which is well known and which was said by Bill Gates. You know, he talked about change management almost, and he said, often we underestimate the change which is happening over the next 10 years, or we overestimate what happens in the next 10 years, but we underestimate, you know, what is going to happen long term. And so that's why the key thing is not to be lulled into inaction, and to make sure that our companies and also ourselves in our own careers, you know, are ready to take in new information, new developments, in order to be at the top of our game and at the top of our industries. And I love this cover. Do you remember 10 years ago in Forbes, they had the CEO of Nokia, and it said, can anyone catch Nokia as a cell phone king? You know, and Nokia was by far leading, and nobody would ever have thought that Apple would catch up. I mean, nobody would have thought that Apple would almost make Nokia go out of business. You know, so incredible to see that. And if I go to Goldman Sachs on the next page, you know, Goldman Sachs, one of the well-known investment banks, had 600 cash equity traders, you know, just in 2000. Now they've got 2. You know, and the rest is done by computers. So we see this, you know, automation does not anymore affect only the low quality work or the kind of the cheap work or the, you know, the uneducated work, but it affects the most educated work and the hardest jobs equally. And we see that very much in finance now. And so there's a risk of underestimating the fintech revolution. And that's what I always say, let's try to avoid that. You know, let's not think that finance is not going to change, because finance and the way we bank, the way we insure ourselves, the way we will invest, and the way our banks will operate will fundamentally change, and probably in 20 years' time will be unrecognizable to what we know now. And so that's important to be aware, you know, that we need to continuously learn and adopt and work with innovators. If you go to the next page. So what we are doing as well, we are working with our partners to create a fintech school, and we are launching and we are offering courses, you know, on fintech innovation. And the interesting thing is, we did a study last year. You know, we went out to our global community and we said, do you know people who use terms such as blockchain, such as AI, you know, without knowing what those terms mean? And do you know people who are bluffing, basically? you know, and we thought maybe 50% would say we do, but in fact 94%, you know, came back and said, we know people around us in all the banks, you know, we're working in, who are just bluffing. And that's quite worrying to some extent, because it means that lots of people use lots of terms without knowing what they mean, you know. And one reason, of course, could be because there's lots of peer pressure in banking to be modern and to be innovative and to know about fintech, but very few people actually do. That's kind of some examples of our advisory board members. So we work with universities, we work with UCL, Warwick Business School, and also the University of Cambridge. They are influencing and guiding us also in terms of our curriculum. One key topic, of course, is blockchain and how blockchain technologies will change, you know, our infrastructure. And so we are launching, you know, Crypto Valley tours now in May, which are 2 days innovation sessions, you know, on blockchain technologies. Thank you. That's the agenda here, yes. And then what we also do is we are bridging almost the gap between countries. And I came back from China in October, where we launched our fintech book in Mandarin. And it was a great experience, you know, because I've lived in Hong Kong more than 10 years ago when I worked for Morgan Stanley. And at that time, you know, China, to some extent, was not yet as advanced as it is now. You know, now when you go to China and you see the technologies there, you are incredibly impressed. You know, and I thought what I've seen there and the entrepreneurs I spoke there, to some extent, and the technologies they've developed, you know, are unheard of, often here in the UK, and we would enormously benefit, you know, of working with them. Equally, they would benefit of working with us. So we're really working on this FinTech Bridge conference of getting both sides coming together and also connecting our governments and our venture capital arms. And now if I start, you know, kind of to share my lessons, you know, as a woman, and I put it as my 5 life lessons. You know, and I'm, I guess, a career woman in one sense. I'm also a mother of 2 girls, so I'm very much about female empowerment. And I summarize here a few things which I think are really important. The first one is, it's important to say yes to opportunities. And I remember I have a girlfriend of mine, you know, she was successful very young. I think she was like 22, 23 when she got a great job at a Spanish bank. And she was a great salesperson, you know, so she had wonderful revenue figures and became the branch manager of her bank branch. And then the head of the area in Spain offered her to become the regional head at the age of 23, 24. And she turned it down. She said, no, I feel I'm too young. You know, I want to earn a few more years of experience, and maybe then in 2-3 years I want to take on this role. But of course, this offer never came back. You know, so don't miss opportunities, just say yes, because you will grow into those roles, and don't say no, because they might not come back. Second one is, if you just go, don't worry. Focus, don't try to win all battles. That's another important one, you know, because there's so many things we could aim for, or we could, you know, fight against. There's so many challenges to some extent, you know, which we want to overcome, but we have to be focused. And I think it's important for all of us to know what really matters most to you. You know, to be focused on those things and not lose yourself into small things which don't really matter after all, you know, in the long term, but really to be focused. And the third one here is, there's no force more powerful than a woman determined to rise. You know, I really believe in us women a lot. And so I think if we women, you know, want to step up in our careers, in our journeys as entrepreneurs, you know, we have got, I think now is the best time. You know, I think there's never been such a good time for women now to lead and to step up than now. So definitely, you know, let's leverage that time as of now. And equally, just do what works for you, because not everybody has to agree. And I think that's often something we like. You know, of course, if people agree with what we want to do and we like to be liked, but it's not necessary all the time. You know, sometimes if you know that you're on the right track and you know you're on the right path, it's not a requirement that everybody agrees with you, because some people just have other priorities, other visions, and you have to stick to your guns, you know, and to believe in your own gut instinct and your own gut feeling, and go for it. And so that's why, you know, I love this sentence, you know, I can and I will, just watch me.
Wow.
And if you, yes,
Yeah.
go to the next.
This is
Yes.
the one. This is the one I remember best.
Yes, good. And so the last, you know, slide, you know, there's a fun sentence. So, you know, if somebody asks you, so what's your favorite position? Just tell them it's a CEO.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
welcome.
Super. Now, there's some very powerful things that have been said there. Have you been getting some good ideas and some inspiration from that? Yes? Great. Quite a few people have said yes to that, so I'm heartened by that. The next is the presenter that I wanted to have first, but she fits in exactly fine now, as all of our great presenters do. Please have a look at the profile for Lynn Penfold, on your sheets, and please join me in welcoming somebody who's had a very different IT career. She was an IT person and then stepped out into the world of law and found that wasn't challenging enough, so she stepped into the world of high law, I would say. But what I happen to know, but you probably don't, is that she started off as an atomic physicist. So she went to places like CERN in Geneva in Switzerland, spent a lot of time going round and round and smashing into things. Is that right, Lynn? Yes, yes, says Lynn. Please join me in welcoming Lynn Penfold.
So as Dalim said, I came to law in a very circuitous route. My secret, I suppose, is that I have absolutely no career plans. I didn't know what I was going to do next, and I do what seems fun to me at the time. So having spent some time doing physics, I didn't write my PhD because I became a single parent, and actually writing up became too difficult. So I then went and I was an analyst programmer, and I didn't like sitting in front of a terminal with a bunch of techies. So my next move was I sold software. So because I understood it, it seemed like the right way to get myself into a commercial world. And I found that actually it was incredibly challenging, but not intellectually satisfying enough. So I set myself the goal of becoming a lawyer by the time I was 40. Given that I don't have goals, I did this when I was 35, and it's a 4-year training course, so it wasn't that much of a vision, but I did reach that goal. Now, I did take Dalim's instructions literally, so I did the now, the then is my previous job, etc. So I'll walk you through that. So my job title now is General Counsel. I work at the Rail Delivery Group. The strapline there is, as it says on the slides, it exists to enable a better railway by bringing together train operators, freight operators, and network rail. What we are is a group of companies that do common services for the rail industry, and we set the strategy, the modernization strategies, and we try to implement the DFT strategies for the rail industry. And what we do is common systems and common improvements for the rail industry. So in terms of IT, for example, we run the company called the Rail Settlement Plan runs the very large IT systems that settle the money for all the train operating companies. So we gather all the information from ticket sales and travel card sales and season ticket sales, and through algorithms and other things which have existed since rail privatization and before, we apportion that money to the different train operating companies and to Transport for London. So £10 billion per annum pass through our systems. We run the NRE website, National Rail Inquiries. We do rail card fulfillment, etc. And what we're trying to do is modernize, so simplify fares through technology rather than through trying to change the very archaic and very strict rules that we have since privatization. So there's a lot of IT, there's a lot of new work, there's a lot of clever thinking. It's not just about IT, it's about strategy in general. What I do, well, at the moment, what keeps me awake at night is the GDPR compliance. So I'm running the project to try to get us to be GDPR compliant. It's quite challenging. We started quite late because RDG thought of it as an IT problem rather than as a business process problem. And so I'm trying to change that around, and it is difficult and the time is short. I have other legal compliance functions, so making sure that the contracts that RDG puts out are good enough, strong enough. I think one of the things worth saying is that I came to RDG on a 3-month contract, and my work there was to determine whether RDG needed in-house counsel or not. And very quickly I determined that really they did, and they needed it, at quite a high strategic level, because it procures very large IT systems, but it didn't have its own contracts, for example, which seems a bit crazy because you're the customer. Why should you take the supplier's contract? Lots and lots of things were missing. So I deal with IT procurement, disputes, and promoting best practice. And I also deal with a lot of outside interfaces, so like the ORR, which is the Office of Road and Rail, the DFT, Transport for London, third-party retailers like Trainline, and of course the train operating companies. The organization itself is on a journey to standardize itself. So there's a mixed bag of tactical and strategic work. There's very much, I think, a public sector mentality there, so there are challenges in trying to get them to think as a business rather than as something that just exists and gets money and is allowed to spend it without accounting properly. For me, there's a big learning curve because I've always worked in a B2B environment doing IT or telecoms. I've never worked in a customer-facing environment, so I'm now looking at consumer law, competition, quite a lot of litigation, regulatory stuff, procurement, etc. The good thing for me is that it is a learning curve. No 2 days are the same, and I don't come into work and do the same thing every day. And that is absolutely what I love about it. Then, I interpreted that as my previous job. I was the business services director in a company called IPL, based in Bath. I initially came in as the commercial director, but we were trying to shape the company up for sale, so there was a lot of cutting back on senior staff, and I managed the compliance regime, so we had all these ISOs. I also looked after HR and facilities, which is not a legal job at all, but is a very good eye-opener into what makes a business function. That was a challenge because IPL was a 30-year-old company. The founders were still there. There were a huge number of staff who hadn't worked nowhere else. They had come there straight from university and were there all the time, and they were used to doing things in a certain way. And because they were, as I say, on the spectrum, they just didn't like change. And in order to sell the company, we did have to change quite a lot to make it look like a normal company that would fit into a company that would buy them. There was very little commercial feel with the senior staff, so the salespeople were not really salespeople, etc., etc. I joined IPL after working at Capita for a year and a half. Capita had bought the company that I had been working in. That was a bit of a challenge for me because Capita has a very, at the top, I felt that I wasn't bald or short or male, and so I didn't fit in there. So after trying for about a year, I left. And IPL really did stretch me because I was very comfortable in doing the commercial and legal side of things. I had never looked at things like HR and facilities and the other sort of standard business services within a business. The whole issue about driving profitability and cutting back on non-essentials, increasing the EBITDA ready for sale, that was great. So the challenges were as they are there. For me, every challenge is an opportunity. I learn, and driving change in a company like IPL was actually very difficult. So there are interpersonal skills, there's a focus on making really sure that what you say is absolutely correct because people will question everything that you write down. I love being in the exec team and being able to make decisions. A lot of people, I find it very hard to make decisions. And, okay, he's telling me to wind up. So, and personally, for me, an opportunity was to benefit from the sale. My tips: be an enabler and not a blocker. This is particularly important for lawyers who try and tell you why you can't do something. I like finding ways that you can do things. And I like working with people who also have a can-do attitude, as opposed to people who come and present you problems. You can always educate other people into a can-do way of life. And my networks, they are non-existent. I keep moving around the country, I keep changing jobs, so I don't really have a network. So if you have any good suggestions, please let me know. And that's it from me.
Okay, well, I'll represent the short, fat, bald, aged population, or male population here. Right, that was very interesting and some really interesting messages in there. So what we're trying to do in this part is to go into more IT-related careers and give you ideas about what you can do there, especially for the 4 students amongst us, I guess. But I'm sure a lot of this applies to you as well. Well, our next speaker is Professor Vladlena Benson. So guess what her main focus is? But she's also a cybersecurity expert and has a very fascinating background. She may not tell you all of this, but I happen to know that she's a real world jumper. Russia, Florida, UK, and other places, and an international speaker of note. And her focus, of course, is the virtual world of cybersecurity. Please join me in welcoming Vladlena.
Well, thank you. I do apologize for fiddling with the microphone.
Okay, no, you do that, that's fine.
Well, I actually wanted to make a point.
Okay.
A few years ago, I was doing cybersecurity frameworks and risk management for a large professional training organization that was requiring me to talk to people from NATO, MOD, DOD, as Dalim rightfully mentioned, and things like that. And I realized that when you come into, so I came into my first teach wearing a dress, and there's nowhere to pin the microphone down, yeah? And everyone goes, well, we never had such a problem. And we're sitting in the lunchtime, yeah, we're sitting in the lunch sort of room. And of course, I'm the only female in the whole room. Nobody else had any problems with microphones. So I should have been more aware of the technicalities and stuff. But so just before we go into this, I have professor in front of my name. And I always hear at various talks that we do for ISACA and so on, that if you have professor, then expect a very boring speech, yeah? I'm anything but boring, so I hope that you can keep up with me. Cybersecurity and Criminology Center is my current place of work, where I lead a team of six professors in total. 3 cybersecurity, 3 criminology. Guess how many women there are? You're looking at it. Okay. Anyways, it's a fantastic place to work, and I never actually thought about my career, you know, how it relates to whether I'm wearing jeans or I'm not, you know, whether it's a dress or trousers and so on. We look at challenges and we find solutions. And I am so excited to go into my office every day and find solutions to something that, you know, is as acute as it could possibly be. And the landscape in cybersecurity or anywhere in IT has changed so much and so quickly that, you know, when someone goes, what will be our next paper about? And I could pull out, I don't know, quite a stack of things that we can twist and turn and look at the data set in a new ways, or someone phones and goes, could you talk about this? Or could you tell, you know, this company what's the difference between cognitive AI and, of course, you know, machine learning and so on, and other things that exactly how we were told people are a bit bluffing about. But anyways, we do all sorts of stuff, GRC, governance, risk and compliance, BCP, use cases, consultancies take me to companies, and we work with, you know, how the universities or how academic thinking can change the sort of things around the organization. I have a team of PhD students, and they do everything from blockchains and confidentiality, integrity, and so on. Malware detection is my current kind of exciting things that where we're applying machine learning and image recognition in order not only to classify the malware, but to see how we could address the APTs, advanced persistent threats, and as such. One of my PhD students is doing insider threats and again recognition, behavior, and so on. NLP and natural language processing. It turns out to be important in criminology. I only thought it's just a tool. But anyways, and a lot of my research and how I was brought into cybersecurity as such stems from social networks. Many years ago, I was editing a book on social networking and cutting edge technology in education. And that was many years ago. And all of a sudden, I'm getting all those chapters, submissions from all over the world, from US, from Japan, from Australia. And instead of how fantastic this new technology is, I'm getting concerns. Copyright, yeah, stalking, cyberbullying, you know, the cybersecurity. GDPR is the last sort of things on the mind of people who were sort of looking at the social media, let's say, 6-7 years ago, and its implication for academia and things. So I thought maybe I should look, you know, further. But anyways, that was one of the things. Behavior analytics is what I do now in a different context because of OCGs, the organized crime groups. We deal with all sorts of things. I hope that you went to my last talk on the business models of hacking communities and so on. But hopefully it will not be the last conversation that we have. I sit on a number of risk assessment committees on RC UK and for BIRA and so on. I'm an editor. I'm an editor and serve on editorial boards of a number of journals, which I will talk about a little bit later. I'm an author. I have sort of, if I had a belt, I would have, you know, I have a number of books, and one has just been published on psychological examinations in cybersecurity, and a new one in cognitive cybersecurity aspects is just about to be coming out in Elsevier, so talk to me if you're interested. So thought leader on cybersecurity matters. I will just move on. I don't like sort of blowing my trumpet and stuff. So, but anyways, so because I took Lynn's presentation before, and I basically did what you're not supposed to do in academia, yeah? So I used exactly the same slides, and I went on and on and on exactly how Lynn did. I mean, hopefully there was an attribution to her work at the start somewhere in there that you might have stole it in. But many years ago, to me, 1998 was a completely, you know, a different era in the sense. I moved to, I had a US government scholarship, so I went to Texas Tech University many years ago, completed my MSc in computer science, then moved on to University of Texas in Dallas to do my PhD. And to be honest, I never thought of research or academic career that it would be something for me, because we were immersed in what was called Network Corridor in Plano, Texas. Alcatel was my home computer, I would say. It was sort of my desk and so on. Nortel Networks, we were doing some inspirational stuff, and this is what is absolutely exciting. 20 years on in my career, and I'm still as excited about what I'm doing now as groundbreaking the stuff that we were doing in terms of the internet. We were doing internet sort of media streaming standards, sort of just interconnectivity at the time. I mean, I was doing the first APIs for automated software testing. Now looking back, it's 20 years on. It was absolutely amazing. But anyways, where there's lots of girls around me, there's usually kind of, you could count them by maybe on one hand, but usually it's one or two. So I never thought that it was not, you know, it's whether it's a norm or it's not a norm and so on. But actually, my current my current academic position, and where, you know, the thoughts of how the landscape has changed and the challenges of female progression, you know, the pay gap and various other things, sort of made me think more deeply in how we structure, how we look at the strategy of where we would like the career to go. Because when I was, you know, 20 years ago, someone would have told me career journey, I would be like, okay, getting married, having a child. It's not the best plan. But I mean, it's the most fulfilling plan, but overall, I wish I had a plan of my career and then seeing how that works and stuff. By the way, I had my daughter when I was defending my PhD, it worked perfectly. So I would really recommend, you know, how it is done. Yeah, I had no mentoring whatsoever, and it was interesting to be expecting a baby, doing PhD, working in a completely male lab, because the moment, so in the US you don't get time off, so I came back to sort of a week later. I came back to the lab and so on, and everyone goes, where have you been? No flowers, no cards, but I will move on from there. Yeah, because everyone was uncomfortable about talking about it. But anyways, networking, I have a slide to show you. Things changed over the last 20 years, but not so much. At the time, I had no idea what networking meant. I didn't know that there are fantastic events like this. I didn't know how to make networking work, because all of you will walk away from today with a stack of cards. I hope that somewhere in there you can drop me a line on LinkedIn and so on. But overall, you need to know what you're expecting from it, yeah? And it is important to see how the people that you meet fit within your, not requirements, but perhaps ambitions, and how you make things work in terms of your working life in the future. But I'm not telling you what to do. So, networking and so on. At the start, I mean, I'm just looking at 20 years back and decisions that were made and the change of ideology in the US that I had, you know, I decided in 2001 that it's time to go and went to London, where it's been 17 years. It's always been a couple of years and so on. But anyways, all I want to say is I have only one tip for you. Embrace challenges with enthusiasm. There's no point in crying. There's no point in, well, no. I agree with Sharon's point of yes, you need to have a time down and so on. But at some point not too long ago in my career, when we were just starting research, when we were starting publishing, someone said, if you have your journal paper rejected, I'm not sure if anyone had sort of experiences like that, you know, have a drink. I realized that you have a lot of rejections. A lot more than you have successes. So my tip to you is have a drink when you have a success. It's a lot more fulfilling. So surround yourself of positive people because it is important. I love people that I work with. All the other 5 guys in my cybersecurity and criminology research center are absolutely great. You know, we go for pub sort of drinks and so on, but it's also the importance of the work that we're doing. So for example, last week we have just started a new project on OCGs and criminology, sort of the business models of hacking communities. Anyways, my networks, of course, all of you are here in Isaka. Meet people, follow up, build relationships, and this is what my networks were about. My last point to keep Dalim happy is here. We were sent an invitation to a workshop, and as an editor myself, you know, this is a network, international network of business and management journal editors. Anyone who is in academia would love to be an editor. I am myself, but you know, it's one of those things where, wait a second, and if you look down the list and so on, it's quite amazing. There's not a single woman on the list of editors. And then they made, so we dropped them an email and said, you know, it seems to be quite a male lineup of all the editors. They put one woman in. But anyways, overall, all I want to say is that do not dwell on things like that. I have never thought of that, who would I prefer to work with, men or women? I work with talented people. And I work with people who inspire others and make a difference and make some fantastic research results that make our society progress. So what I would like to say is, if you would like to make a difference, I am looking for sponsorships for female PhD in cybersecurity. Anyone who would like to support us in our work and promotion of the cybersecurity talent. We don't think that we have done enough. Mid-career MSc in cybersecurity risk management for women, female apprenticeships in cyber, please drop me a line. We have a fantastic sort of crime prevention and hacker forums going, but all I want to say is that we do need a bit of support for the younger generation that's coming, and hopefully we could do our part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So please get your applications ready for those vacancies that Vladilena has identified, and she'll be around until the end of the evening. Okay, well, the next person that I want to introduce you to is somebody that I met when she said, look, I'm very shy and I'm really not comfortable about public speaking. Unfortunately for Rebecca, she was doing public speaking, and I thought she was doing a great job. So I'm sure this might have been a ruse for her, but I expect that half of the people who heard her at that point said, Rebecca, I'd like you to come and talk and do some public speaking for me. Well, we've been lucky because she's going to do just that. So please join me as soon as she tells me she's ready in welcoming Rebecca Salisbury.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for having me. I'm very pleased to be here to continue the International Women's Day celebrations. One of my colleagues at work said, "When is International Men's Day?" And I said, "Every day." I've also followed the kind of structure to talk about my career journey, going backward, and then I'm going to go backward and then forward. So what I do today is here on the screen. My title is Head of Product for Audience Platform. I'm at the BBC. I work in our technology division. Audience Platform is the part of the BBC that is contributing to making the BBC personal for all of our users. And we're starting to change our language from audiences, which means a large group of people that we treat all the same, to individual consumers. So it's quite a big, challenging role, but very exciting. So what I've listed here is kind of the job description. I just started in November, just gone, and the job is largely product strategy, technology strategy, and then leading the teams, the software development teams, that bring those two things together to make software that surfaces on BBC Online. So when you register and sign in to watch iPlayer, or you get personalized recommendations, or you get alerts on your mobile phone because a sporting event is about to begin, that's what my team do. But that's just the day job. And well, I could tell you about the night job too, because I get a few phone calls. But what we do is quite quite large in scale. We have tens of millions of users every day using our service, and it doesn't stop. It's 24/7/365, as they say. So it's quite a big job. What's more interesting maybe is what it's really like, what it's like for me. My experience of my role is that, well, sometimes I joke that I'm just a manager, but that's the bit of my job that I take most seriously and I enjoy most. It's what I've found to be what most rewarding, and I think it's where my strengths lie. I have about 100 software developers and analysts and architects. I know what an architect is too, Sharon. So multidisciplinary teams, and they're working on quite big projects all the time. And the second part, I would say, that in terms of the reality check, is a lot of stakeholder management. So you might imagine that in any organization the size of the BBC, there's a lot of that going on. And it's either keeping people informed, or trying to gain consensus, or forcing them to make decisions. So a lot of what these ladies have said rings true for me as well. And even when it goes wrong, when I get a phone call in the middle of the night because it's not working, and I'm being asked to make a decision whilst trying to wake up and go, who is this? Is this my mother? No. Even when it goes wrong, it's important. The work that I do and that my team does is important. That's why I'm getting a call in the middle of the night to make things right. So that's extremely rewarding as well. And here's something else. This is my team, and they are a talented, diverse, passionate, committed, hardworking bunch of people, and mostly they're happy. I don't know what someone said here, but they all look tremendously happy in this picture. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got to this point. I didn't have a plan, and I wasn't climbing a ladder. It was more like snakes and ladders. It's what some people call a career spider web, so I'm going to tell you a bit about mine. You've already worked out that I'm not from around here. I grew up in New England in a place called Maine, and I had my first jobs in my family's hardware and garden center, age of 10, little kid. Definitely wouldn't have popped up above this podium. And another day I can tell you stories like about how when I was 15, I found myself running my family business for the whole summer. So I was employing people who were 10 or 15 years older than me. I didn't have a driving license, but I was running accounts payable for my family business. No one in my family went to university, but I did. I thought I wanted to be a primary school teacher, and then I got in a classroom with a load of little kids and decided that secondary mathematics was probably more my thing. So I did that for a bit, and then late in my university career, I was introduced to a personal computer. I'm showing my age now. A personal computer that just blew my head off. I was like, wow, this is amazing. What I can do now myself without having to stare at a black screen with green letters going up and down. So I stayed on to do a master's degree and learn more about how personal computing could be applied in a classroom. And then more accidents and being in the right place at the right time and meeting loads of people. I did a whole bunch of different jobs at the university in different departments, some of which, looking back, I can't believe I did them. I wrote a database system one time, knew nothing about databases. I had a job as a network manager, didn't know anything about networks. I was actually responsible for a dye sublimation printer. And it terrified me. And it's hard to believe that one could be afraid of a printer, but it gives me the creeps even now thinking about it. And then, so that was all happening in the States, the University of Maine, and then I decided I needed a change of scene, a big change of scene. I left the United States, I came to the UK, I didn't know anyone here, traveled around for a bit, and then again, through people that I knew who knew some people that I didn't know, I got a job working for a company called TiVo that was just bringing its consumer electronics service here. That was in 2000, and I became their customer operations manager. I didn't even know what that meant, but it basically meant take complaints from angry early adopters and try and figure out what was wrong with their hardware. So I did that for a bit. TiVo was working with Sky. When the TiVo job finished, I got a job in Sky, and I was doing some weird Television X and Discovery Channel. Oh, you don't want to know. Anyway, and then I became a web project manager, and I was delivering products to Sky.com. And that really, really changed the direction that my career was taking. And from there, I went from big media company to a small consultancy with big media clients. So that was quite different. The project was a failure, but it really gave me a lot of opportunity in my career. I learned a ton from that experience. And then I was introduced to the BBC. And I've been at the BBC now for just over 8 years. I've had 6 different job titles in that time. So although many of us have the impression that the BBC must be a slow-moving, sloth-like organization, it changes a lot. And I've been able to capitalize on those changes. So challenges and opportunities, I've kind of put them on a seesaw because most of what I have done in making decisions about my career has been weighing up those challenges and opportunities. And there's kind of 2 sides to all of them. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had always been told and sometimes believed that I could be anything I wanted. I was short of role models, let's just say that. I thought a profession was being a plumber, and now I hear that that's a trade. But I was okay being different and plowing my own furrow, as they say. When in my day, technical roles, IT was very technical and therefore inaccessible to me. And I dare say that if I had gone through school 20 years later, I would have chosen a different path. But I'm old, so I didn't. Moving to the UK was a huge challenge and a giant opportunity, and I grabbed hold of it. I did a lot of crying as well, but bounced back. Small companies and big companies have provided challenges and opportunities. I tend to keep gravitating toward the big ones, and well, that's another story. And then I've had some very small-minded managers and some terrifically supportive ones, and those have been both challenging and helpful to me. So rather than advice, I think tips implies advice, but let me tell you what's worked for me, and then there might be something that you'd like to adapt or adopt. I know what motivates me, what keeps me interested, what helps me to build on my strengths, and what I find rewarding, and what I don't. So I focus on those attributes. I pursue things to do, the characteristics of roles, and not titles, and not hierarchy or position in a company. I focus, for instance, on being able to develop and work with people. That is really important to me. The job title is not. I keep an open mind, and open eyes and ears, and I really value learning from the experience of others. I am willing to take a risk, even a big one, like changing countries and not knowing anyone, starting over. But I don't make hasty decisions. I spent 18 months planning that move. My dad thinks it was hasty, but then I could have spent my whole life planning it and he would have thought that was crazy. And importantly, I am the spider in my spider web, not the fly. So I don't feel as though I'm caught in a web ever. I'm in control of the situation. And so whatever happens is cool. And so my networks are current and past colleagues, current employees, current past staff, people I mentor, people who I look to for advice. And I've plugged our Women in STEM network that we have at the BBC. That's a growing network for women to be connected to each other. And that's everything I have to say. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I hope you're making notes about all these tips and ideas. I see a number of people are. That's great, because what I'd like to say is that this is for you. So I've had people asking me after previous events, okay, well, there were too many presenters, you didn't give them enough time to talk, and, you know, it wasn't so good for me. Well, we've got another part after this, of course, which will be your part. It'll be the networking, the informal networking, and the onus is on you. If you want to make contact with somebody, you've got 6 great presenters here. You make the most of the occasion, I would suggest. And especially when you come to see people and talk to them and so on, try and make those contacts, which mean that you can then follow up later. The simple principles of networking, I would say. But anyway, we still have one other final great presenter to listen to. And she is, I find, very inspirational. And I think that you will see that she's got a very important role. But I don't know. Tell me, Jill, did you start working in a garden centre or something like this as well, as Rebecca did? Please join me in welcoming Jill Williams.
So I'm just... Okay. First of all, I'm not shy. I've got nothing against shy people, but just you probably work that out pretty quickly. And I'd like to celebrate the diversity of our interpretation of the brief from Dalim on what we need to do in the slides. I think we all took a different, slightly different stance to it. So I think I declared to Rebecca that one of my clients sent me a fantastic pack about a project that they were doing, and I saw that this worm diagram appeared, and I thought, I'm going to grab that and use it because it's very visual and I like things that flow. So I decided to do something slightly different by looking at then and now, so to take you on a journey of my somewhat interesting career. So I did a degree at Newcastle Poly. I'm not ashamed of that, it was fantastic, in international business and administration studies. And one of the key things from that is I can type. And I can type and I can do shorthand. And that was really a very important skill, particularly seeing as I forgot to actually apply for any jobs in the last year of doing my degree. And found myself, you know, with a degree, a very good degree, but unfortunately no job at all. So I went back home and started to do some temping work. And my first job was typing Christmas card labels for a company called Bryden Fibres in Newcastle. And I remember it because I was sat next to the receptionist and she had a very strong Geordie accent. She'd say, Bryden Fibres. And I always remember my very first job. So I typed Christmas card labels, I typed envelopes, I typed letters for people for a good couple of months. And then I got a job here, just so you know, we're on this part of the worm, a very lofty job as a secretary for a company called ICI, chemical company. Does anyone remember it? Yeah. They still do paints. And in my world, as a northeastern person, that was a fantastic achievement. Forget the fact I had a degree, but my dad was saying, oh, she works at the ICI, that one. My daughter works at the ICI. And the reason why it was such a big thing is because the pensions at ICI was supposed to be fantastic. So I worked as a secretary, even though I had a degree, and I learnt a lot of things. I learnt that actually women aren't often very kind to other women. I definitely learnt that. I learnt how to survive on a chemical plant as a woman. That was very interesting, and I've got some tales to tell of that. And I also learnt that actually being a secretary taught me how to respect other people's secretarial people, and my assistant has stayed with me for 10 years, and because we've got a very good relationship. So never undermine or underestimate the power of a good assistant or secretary in your life. So after a while, I thought I might want to do a different challenge, and I applied for an internal promotion to become an office systems analyst, and I got it. And coming back to the women aren't always very nice to other women, the other secretary in my group rang up to complain that I'd been offered such a lofty position because she didn't think I was worth it. I think she's still a secretary, so anyway. So after that, I did that role as office systems analyst, and I was actually implementing mainframe office systems. Does everyone still remember what a mainframe is? And it was based on IBM Profs, and it was a system that we named in ICI called Stratos. And again, I can't ever see that word without remembering many great years working on that particular implementation. And then I got various different promotions through that, did analyst, programmer, systems analyst, business analyst work, and I joined the ICI Management Club, which was a great accolade, great achievement. You had to be a certain grade to be able to join it. And I was one of 2 women in that particular club. And it also had a leisure facility. And I remember that I'd arrived when there was a notice outside of the jacuzzi that said, "There are now women managers. Please do not be naked." So I thought, my God, I've definitely arrived here. So I did lots of different jobs in the technology function and really realised that what my real passion is, and it's still my passion today, is the application of technology. So that, somewhat similar to Sharon, how do you use technology to solve problems? And that has been a constant theme for the rest of my career. So I did lots of different things like wide area networks, implementations, certificate of analysis systems. I implemented BPICS, and then I discovered SAP, which has stuck with me for quite some time. Has everyone heard of SAP? Yeah, so very big in my life, still continues to be a big feature of my life. And I love that because, again, it's a problem-solving application for our clients. So having done lots of different things in ICI and having had a real journey, including the implementation of laptops for the executive board at ICI. Again, as a fairly young, naive woman at the time, I did all of those things that they said. So could you possibly bend over and plug that laptop in that sort of little corner for me whilst they were having a look at my less significant behind? And I did all of those different things that I really wish I shouldn't have done, and learnt a lot. I also remember when I had to go down and do a site visit because we were implementing a new operating system in one of the control rooms. And the guy said to me, "You have to wear a skirt when you're on site." I said, "Well, why?" They said, "Well, because if there's an emergency, we need to be able to tell the men from the women." So of course I did that, and I walked up the steps to the control room as they'd aligned all the engineers underneath it to look up my skirt as I did. But anyway, I learned a lot. So after doing lots and lots of stuff at ICI, I thought, well, I'm going to do something. And actually my husband found me a job with Ernst & Young, which seemed to be just the ticket. It was all about controls, it was about SAP, and it was about technology. So I joined EY, had a fantastic time there as a senior manager. Again, learnt a lot. I guess one of my favourite things was when I was an IT expert witness, and I'd never been an expert witness before. And in the interview process, they said, "Have you ever been an expert witness?" And I said, "I won't lie, but I have watched every episode of Ally McBeal." And interestingly, I got the job, and the feedback was, if we have to be locked in a room looking at legal documents for the next 2 years, we'd rather be locked in a room with a person with a sense of humour. So that's essentially why I got it. So I stayed as a senior manager for a couple of years, and then I was put on partner track, And by the time I was ready to become a partner, I was 3 months pregnant. And there was a sort of like wide-scale fear of this because my boss at the time was a famously child-free female. So whenever people say, well, you're childless, she said, I'm not childless, I'm child-free. And I thought that was a nice way of putting it. And she was a fantastic advocate for diversity, not just gender diversity, but all types of diversity. So I rang her up and I said, I am 3 months pregnant. And I just need to tell you that because obviously you're about to make me a partner. And she said, are you ringing me to tell me, she said, first of all, congratulations. Are you ringing to tell me that you don't think you can operate as a partner? And I said, no, I'm not ringing you to say, well, all I have got to say is congratulations. We're delighted for you. So she was absolutely fantastic and has still been a good mentor for me. So I made a baby, I made partner, and in that regard, I didn't do the baby bit on my own. My husband was involved in that. And I led the IT risk practice in the region, so outside of London. And had a great experience, actually. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of my experience at EY. But after a while, I decided I wanted to make a change. And I decided that PwC was where I wanted to be, which is where I am now. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four chartered accountants, professional services firms. And so after 22 interviews, I joined at PwC as a partner in the assurance practice looking after technology risk. And I think the reason I had 22 interviews was because I was the first outside-in partner hire that they'd made it into the assurance practice in London. So I'm not now the only one, but I was the first. Plus also, you may have spotted I'm a bit of a raving extrovert, so there was a question about how would I fit in this world that isn't necessarily filled with people who are as wildly extroverts as myself. So I joined that. EY weren't very happy, so they put me in the garden for a year, so I thought that was good, and we got chickens and that was good. And I also thought, well, I need to do something good, so I set up a nursery, not for plants, but for children, in the local school, and I ran that for 5 years, and I really enjoyed that because it was a good way of giving something back. And so now I am a technology risk partner. I lead technology audit, which is the IT aspects of internal audit work. I also do a lot of the technology work on our external audit, and one of my main passions is around solutions. So I'm the National Assurance Solutions Leader, and my remit is to think about how we can technology enable what we do. So the work that we do around commercials and contracting assurance, I'm looking at how we're using data scraping to feed all of those often hard copy contracts into systems that we can pull out key terms, analyse that sort of data, so lots of unstructured data. I'm looking at, I mentioned to some of you, SOX Botics, which is looking at how we can enable the testing of Sarbanes-Oxley controls using robotics and artificial intelligence. And I'm doing quite a lot of things about how to enable functions with technology, so compliance functions, internal audit functions, and external audit. So that's where I am now. I also look after utilities, assurance, and again, we've seen quite a lot of technology application in utilities such as smart metering, connected homes, so that ability to switch on your heating from the car. Obviously, you shouldn't use your phone while driving, but all of those different things. So that's where I am now. So just following the brief, challenges and opportunities. I think some of the challenges that, again, these are personal to me that I faced. Again, I've borrowed the logos from a client, so they may not match the words, but I think they're still pretty. Sometimes having a victim mentality. I mean, I deal with a lot of people who would want to spend a lot of time about how they've had a hard life and how nobody's giving them an opportunity. So I think I have never had that, but I have seen a lot of people who feel like they're in a minority and talk themselves into being a victim. I think another challenge has been around set operating models. So we're seeing a lot of disruption with emerging technology, and we're seeing operating models change. But sometimes it takes a long time to change the way in which people think. Even things like flexible working, even the use of technology, remote access, digital, of those different pieces. And I think also that aligned with that, some of the challenges is that disruption, even if it's gender diversity or ethnic diversity, or even being the only extrovert in the village, as I often describe myself, disruption is seen as a negative thing rather than a positive thing. But I think there are opportunities as well, and I think, Sharon, you mentioned resilience. So that the world that we live in is a minefield to learn how to be personally resilient. And when I first joined PwC, my boss at the time, Mark Amatrano, a fantastic guy, he said I needed to work on my personal resilience because he didn't worry about other people throwing me off the cliff. He worried about me jumping. And he said, you need to sort of, get some resilience and start to be focused on how you can manage some of the bumps in the road that you will have in a career in PwC. And that's been very helpful to me. Networking is important. I like to think that I do networking with a purpose. So I don't network for the sake of networking. I use it to learn, to support, to engage, to better myself and hopefully help others. And then finally, something again very close to my heart is about celebrating good behaviours. So when people, are inclusive, when people treat you well, treat others well, where people are innovative and do the right thing, I think it's really important that we call it out, and there's an opportunity there to call out the good things that happen. So on International Women's Day, on the 8th of March, I got a hug from a fellow partner, a nice guy called Jan Umbricht, and I got an I Love Technology Audit sticker that was personalised to me, and I got a £10 voucher off Jamie's Italian. These are all from people. And I took to the partner WhatsApp that we have, and I said, just wanted to say what a lovely day I've had, and people have given me these little gifts and I really appreciate it. And the flood of response back saying, oh, isn't it great when we celebrate good behaviours and good thinking and nice thoughts. So I'm going to shut up because you've got a double dose of me because I'm going to chair the panel. So top tips from me, again, what works for me, maybe not everybody. Celebrate your difference. So I am celebrating that I am not shy and an extrovert. I work with a lot of people. In fact, I'm married to probably the shyest person in the universe. And you can imagine how that works. I think it's important to talk about merit. I don't think anybody wants diversity for the sake of diversity. I think it's got to be merit-based diversity. So again, as one of 3 female partners in a cast of 50 partners in our London top-tier practice, none of my fellow female partners want to be promoted or progressed because we're women. We all want to do it based on merit. And I don't know many men that want to be progressed for anything other than merit. So I think it's important to bring the story back to who deserves what, where is the merit. I think to your point, Sharon, stay authentic, be yourself because everyone else is taken. I love that. Again, one thing that I've done a lot of is laugh in the face of the ridiculous. So when people do say something absolutely outrageously stupid to you, then just laugh in their face. I think somebody said to me in a kind of group session, how would you deal with when somebody says something stupid? I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, someone said to me that I was far too good looking to ever become a partner. And I said, well, what did you do? She said, well, I went straight to my boss and I reported them straight away. And she said, what would you do? I said, I would just have laughed. What a stupid thing to say. I say, thank you that you think I'm good looking, but let me just say, what a stupid thing to say. How silly are you? Anyway, and then the final thing is become a tech diva, a data diva. So my 50th birthday some years ago, I got lots of lovely presents from people that I work with, but the thing that I most prize, even though I got lots of Mont Blanc and very expensive pens, was a silver pen called #DataDiva, and it's got engraved, and one of my team, one of my directors gave it to me. And it's a prized possession because he is a data expert, and I'm not really a data expert, but he gave me that pen that says I'm a data diva. And after looking after the data practice for several years in PwC, I then recruited several partners who are now leading it much better than I did. And I wondered whether I should give him that pen back because you know, I'm no longer a data diva. And he said to me, you'll always be the #1 data diva. So become a diva in something, technology or data and all of that kind of jazz. I've probably gone over, have I?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Ta-da! So
Let's have the panel session.
thank you. So what I'd like to make sure is that everybody has an opportunity to ask a question if you want to ask a question, so it's not compulsory. I think there'll be some questions from those sessions where you want to ask an individual, and I think that's perfectly fine. And there are some that you would like to perhaps address to the entire group. So we're going to have a couple of rules in terms of, if it's a group, please tell us you want a group response. If it's an individual, please remember their name. I'm trying to work out whether or not I can do it because everybody's sat in a different order. So I won't embarrass myself by showing that I'm slightly suffering from dementia. And I guess the key thing is that we'll try not to have more than 2 responses to each question, because I've been in those pitches where you've got 6 layers on a response. Okay, so would anyone like to start? And if you're still thinking about it, I've got a question that might get you in the mood. So I'd like to ask a question to Sharon. You are Sharon, aren't you?
I am Sharon.
So Sharon, you said that you like to solve problems. What has been the biggest problem that you have ever solved in your career?
Oh, gosh. Oh dear, that's a hard one. What's the biggest problem? I've got one I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about, so this is going to go well. We were working on a public sector project, and one of the biggest challenges that you will probably appreciate as well with working on a public sector project is making sure it's not in the news every single day. So yeah, we were basically working on a piece of well, not a piece, many pieces of technology that were very complicated, came from lots of different suppliers, and the responsibility I had was basically joining it all up. That's kind of what I do. I mean, integration has been my focus. So yeah, joining it all up, but it not being able to talk about what it was makes it a little bit awkward, but just because of our customer we can't. But essentially it's joining things up, and I think for me it was because there were so many contributors, we had hundreds and hundreds working on that. The challenge is not just joining up the technology, but joining up the people and getting them to deliver their bits and pieces that they need to deliver on time and getting them to talk to one another. And so probably that. It did happen to be in the transport arena, but that's more all I can say.
Okay. Anyone got a question yet?
Clearly a group of successful women, thank you for sharing. But what I'm interested is perhaps what was the most difficult barrier to achieving the next thing you wanted to achieve? So it might have happened early in your career, it might have happened later, but does that make that clear? Yeah, it could have happened at any time. So it's kind of a broad one for the panel, so pick your 2.
Well, I would start, because I think the biggest barrier for me was not knowing what I wanted. And I think that there were several that did the different presentations that said there wasn't a clear plan or a clear strategy. And I remember a partner that I used to work with in EY, great guy, you know, he said to me, the difference between men and women is that men are always asking for what they want and women rarely do. And actually, I put into place what he said, and I went to the top of the practice and said, I want to be on the board. And eventually I was. So I think that to me was the biggest barrier for me, but perhaps somebody else would like to talk.
I seem to fall into the next thing, and I think I'm trying to think of barriers, but actually I can't, because I just grabbed the next opportunity because it was interesting.
Maybe one thing to add is, I guess one barrier I find lots of times is women who have children who want to go back to work. That's a huge barrier often, because you want to get a part-time job, but you don't want to work as a secretary, so you want to have an intelligent job, and there are not enough part-time jobs out there. So I think that's why we lose lots of great women.
I don't know. I have to follow up on this one because I still remember how happy I was to go back to work after staying for 4 months with my second daughter. It was so easy. You just go back to sit in the office and do your research and do some amazing stuff. Yes, compared to having a baby, it's like nothing. So for me, it was a very quick decision. But the part that I wanted to ask sort of about the barriers, or to answer about the barriers, actually relate what Rebecca was talking about, the decision-making process of 18 months. When I discussed my sort of career progression aspirations with my husband, what do I do? Should I take this job? Should I not? This is the web of doubt that is quite common to women. I was told again. But my husband said, well, just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. Like, well, I have done the pros and cons and so on. But, ultimately, don't look back. There's nothing that holds you.
Thank you. Thanks. Any more?
Firstly, thank you for all sharing your golden nuggets. I mean, you're all inspirational in your own unique way. Jill, I like that you said that you're not shy and that you like things that flow. I'm very much like that. I can relate to Lynn, who just falls into the next thing, and if I look at my CV, I'm like, I think any employer will be very confused with what do you actually want to do. To my question is really to Rebecca, and the rest of you are welcome to add on. You say that you don't focus on the title, but rather on the characteristics of the role. And being 32 and in my second career, I've been a chef for 10 years and now I'm in IT because it's what I studied. I feel like maybe I should focus on, what is the next role? I'm now in service support, IT support, but should I become service delivery manager? Should I become a business analyst? And I feel like, should I be pushing the role, or should I just enjoy the challenges and the opportunities that my current role is just really evolving as it's going? Hope that makes sense.
So your question is, how do you make sense of what to do next?
Yeah, rather should I just evolve with it, or do I focus on really just pushing for the title?
Well, I think it depends on what you want. I mean, the title and the kind of position in a company hasn't been a motivator for me. Remember, I talked about what motivates me and what keeps me interested. So I'm focusing on what are the challenges, what are the learning opportunities in the role. That's what excites me, and that helps me boil down to what is at the center of the role, because the job title often doesn't tell you anything about what it will be like. And so for me, it wasn't about the title, it's about what the job is, what I can get out of it, and what I can bring to it. And that helps, I think, to also focus on what transferable skills you have to bring to a new opportunity.
So make sure you enjoy what you're doing now. I think that's really important. And don't just move on for the sake of moving on because you feel that you have to. And people will look at your CV. If you've only done 3 months here and then 3 months there, 3 months there, another, depending on, that could be tricky. Now, it might actually be the right thing, but do have a think about making sure that you've got those skills, a good solid foundation. But if you know you're going to get bored, it is a good idea to think ahead, because you don't want to get to the point that you're bored and then you're sat doing something for 6 months, 9 months, 10, 12 months, and you're still bored and you haven't identified the next thing yet. So I think I would say enjoy what you're doing now, but be prepared to move into something that you really want to do. And I think you're absolutely right. I haven't moved for titles. Sometimes I've moved sideways, sometimes I've moved up. About building my skills, making sure I'm relevant, and that I'm doing what I find valuable and rewarding as well. So, yeah, enjoy what you're doing now too.
Thank you.
So a follow on from that, kind of for the panel, when you get to a point in your career when you've moved on, has that come naturally? Has that come to a point where, right, I'm done here, I need a new challenge, or did you just progress your career just because you wanted to add to your CV and keep growing, or was it because you're at that point and you can't do any more? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Suzanne, why don't you do it?
Yeah. I guess my first, job change, I worked for Accenture as a consultant, and I was employed in Vienna, and they sent me to London to work for customers, for banks here. And the reason why I changed there was because they wanted me to go back to Vienna, to go to Frankfurt. You know, I wanted to stay in London. So it was, for me, it was a geographic need, you know, to change jobs in order to stay in the city I wanted to stay in. When I moved between Lloyds and Deutsche Bank, for example, it was because I could see after the financial crisis that there was a huge opportunity in the regulatory space. So sometimes, I guess, if you know the market well and you see the opportunities in your industry, you want to position yourself to be part of big trends, you know, part of big opportunities. And so if you identify those trends, it's good to add skills which make you a valuable player in those areas. And so then you might want to change because of that, you know, to get to a job which leads you long term into a direction you think is more valuable.
If you could really name trends in digital space, what do you feel like coming? Also as a suggestion, probably to the young woman, what directions?
Yes, I would say, you know, one trend that I think is part of the sharing economy. You know, the sharing, the network economy we are all in, that we are much more willing to share, you know, from our own lives, our own business experiences, and willing to contribute to joint projects. So we see that for our fintech books, you know, which are crowdsourced, where we use the best authors worldwide, you know, in different topics in fintech, and they contribute, you know, because they want to be part of a published book by Wiley. And so we, as the curator almost of this crowdsourced project, you know, we had initially the task that our first challenge was to get enough contributors joining us. Our second challenge was that after we got them all, to find the best publisher to publish our insights. And so I think this crowdsourcing, the willingness to work as a crowd, I think is a big trend. And also to some extent that the crowd can be more powerful and more knowledgeable than individuals, even experts. You know, we see that in the stock market, where nowadays portfolio managers, when they manage their investment portfolios, they often use signals from the crowd. You know, they use Twitter signals, you know, what is being talked about on social media, what are the sentiment analysis, you know, what is being talked, and what is sentiment, you know, what is being mentioned. And so it sometimes, you know, new sources of data can give you insights that you never used before because you never thought that they would be relevant. And so I think in terms of new trends, I would say it's to be creative, you know, and to use data which has in the past not been accessible, which again comes to the fact that data, how did you call it, a diva, I think is a great compliment. So I understand why you always take the pen. And you know, I would say in terms of when I talk to my children, I always say, you know, because they are 13 and 11, they're still not even teenagers, but I say, you know, when I think about whom I should hire, you know, I don't want to hire just people who are just, let's say, who just studied but I would like to hire people who have got expertise in certain areas. And this might be that they are social media experts, you know, that they're growth hackers, because they know how to create a community around them. And nowadays, in our world, when we talk about ecosystems, you know, you want to have growth hackers on your team who can hack the growth of a business idea, of a business service, by creating a trend, a momentum with their sense of leadership, their social networking skills. So I think it's a combination of various things, but I think it's all very positive because it gives the power to us individuals, and it removes the large barriers of entry which existed before, where you had to have $5 million to start a business. You know, now it's $5,000 to do that.
Thank you.
And can I just add to that? I would say that there's two things. There's one about learning about different technologies and the trends that you've mentioned there, and obviously I'm very involved in robotics and artificial intelligence and drones and all those different things. But I think the other skills that people need to understand is the application of those technologies. So just having a general curiosity around how businesses work, how disruption works, how technology can be applied to drive different outcomes. So actually, the best people that I see in my team and in our practice around emerging technology are those people that are actually, they understand enough about the technology to be good bluffers, I think that was your word, but their real talent is creativity and application knowledge. So how to apply it for the better good. So I can see that Dalim's been hovering with books and things at the back. So if it's okay with you, Dalim, I'll thank my fellow panellists and thank you for your attention. I do like an audience that keeps nodding a lot, and I think you've been excellent nodders. So on behalf of my fellow speakers, thank you very much. Cheers.